This is Strictly Business, presented by the Greater Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce. Sponsored in part by the law offices of Young Wooldridge, San Joaquin Community Hospital.
Good morning and welcome to Strictly Business for Monday, April the 6th, 2015. I'm Nathan Ollie, the Manager of Government Affairs for the Greater Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce. On today's show, Beatris Sanders, Executive Director for the Kern County Farm Bureau, will discuss how California's four-year drought and the governor's executive order for mandatory water reductions will impact Kern County's ag industry. Then Marcia Sutton with Barrett Business Solutions Incorporated will explain what kind of information employers should collect during background checks of potential new hires and what pitfalls to avoid. Then, the Chamber's Communications Manager, Melissa Rossiter, and Dustin Pitcher, the Technical Director with the Marcom Group, will discuss our Chamber's new website that's expected to launch in a few weeks. And finally, Jennifer Barrera with the California Chamber of Commerce will explain pending legislation that impacts business, particularly in labor and employment and taxation issues. But first, let's take a look at some business news you can use. Bright House Networks has been purchased by Charter Communications. According to Reuters, the deal is valued at $10.4 billion. The transaction will make the new company the second largest cable operator in the U.S. The move also comes at a time as cable operators are scrambling to consolidate amid growing competition from companies like Netflix. The deal is contingent on certain conditions, including Charter shareholder approval, the expiration of Time Warner Cable's right of first offer for Bright House, and the closing of Charter's previously announced deals with Comcast. Looking at the oil industry, more layoffs have been announced. The Californian reported that Halliburton has cut 90 jobs in the Bakersfield area since mid-February. Halliburton attributed the cuts to the recent fall in oil barrel prices. The State Employment Development Department estimates that Kern County has lost 1,200 oil-related jobs since December. In more positive news, 3 Hagan markets have opened in Bakersfield. The Californian also reports that 3 Albertsons stores in Bakersfield reopened as Hagan Food and Pharmacy Grocers. The switch came after Hagan bought 146 grocery stores in Oregon, Washington, California, and Nevada in 2014 when Albertsons merged with Safeway. The deal included 3 stores in Bakersfield, one on Stockdale Highway, one on Panama Lane, and one on White Lane. The company also kept all 250 employees that worked at the Bakersfield locations. In national trends, consumers are cautious about spending, but savings are at a 2-year high. Reuters reported that more U.S. households are choosing to save their money rather than spend it. Consumer spending barely rose in February as many households scaled back on making large purchases such as buying a car. However, Americans are saving more, with savings hitting its highest level in more than 2 years. Economists say economic growth has been undercut by bad winter weather, a strong dollar, a resolution in the West Coast port dispute, and lower demand overseas. A new bill could raise sales tax in California. The Sacramento Bee has reported that a state lawmaker has proposed a bill that would allow local governments the power to add another 1% to the combined state-local sales tax rate with voter approval. Currently, local governments have the authority to add only 2%. The state's current tax rate is 7.5%, but is higher in other areas of the state. The bill is currently working its way through the Assembly. Should you let the job find you? That's according to the Wall Street Journal. Pounding the pavement looking for a job may not be the way to go. According to the newspaper, the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco reported that most people who get a new job were not looking for one. Most new jobs are coming from referrals or by direct contacts by firms that are looking to hire. Back in California, the Sierra snowpack has hit a historic low. The Fresno Bee reported that Sierra snowpack in the Sierra Nevada is at an all-time low this year at 5% of average, making this the driest winter on record. As a result of the low snowpack, Governor Brown has ordered the first ever mandatory water cutbacks. The governor was on hand in the Sierra for snow measurement last week, and he ordered the first ever mandatory reductions. The Sacramento Bee reported the governor's plan wants to achieve a 25% reduction in water usage statewide. Governor Brown said state officials will fine water agencies $10,000 a day if they fail to meet state targets for water conservation, and water agencies have the authority to raise rates to encourage conservation. The governor is also urging the state to ditch 50 million square feet of lawns for more drought-resistant landscaping. Farmers will be exempt from the governor's cutbacks, but here to offer some insight into how the drought is continuing to plague the local ag industry is Beatris Sanders. She's the executive director of the Kern County Farm Bureau. Thanks very much for being here this morning.
Thanks
we appreciate
for
it.
having me. Mm-hmm.
Not a fun topic to talk about, but certainly something very important. So, how do you think that the lower snowpack in the Sierras and some of these rules that the governor is talking to, how are they going to impact local farmers and the ag industry?
Well, the hardest part in answering that question is that it isn't the first year of low snowpack, it's the fourth.
Right.
So I feel like farmers have in the past, dealt with droughts differently by digging into or pumping more of the groundwater supply. But this year in particular, the groundwater supply is already low. So we're having to deal with spending more on water wells, digging them deeper from, I guess most of them are about 400 feet. They're digging them to 1,000. And that isn't cheap for growers to do.
Right.
It costs close to $500,000 to dig your well deeper. And even then I've heard that some of our growers are even finding low waters at 1,000 feet. So it's different this year because we're having to deal with groundwater legislation that's in our near future for agriculture, which is, I believe, why the governor didn't, have so many details in his water mandate for agriculture, is because we are already dealing with having to regulate our groundwater pumping through the legislation that came into effect this last year. With that, I do know that in the governor's mandate, he did say that we will have to start monitoring or have to start keeping record of how much we're pumping. So we're not completely excluded or exempt from that water mandate.
Okay. So what are some of the impacts that you're hearing? You mentioned that they're having a hard time finding groundwater if they're digging the wells deeper. What are some of the other struggles that some of the farmers are dealing with?
Well, last year, I think it was close to 100,000 acres that we had to fallow, that some of our growers had to fallow here. Statewide, I think it's closer to 500,000 acres of farmland has now been let go. I think we'll start to continue to see more of that, or you'll see growers who are able to rotate their crops from some of the more thirsty crops, like, say, lettuce. They'll opt for either permanent crops or to not plant at all.
Oh, okay. And do we know how much in terms of dollars the local ag industry has seen as a result of the drought?
I don't, I think those numbers still have to come out. We have lost a lot of acreage, and with that comes the loss of jobs, which is really big. And, the peak seasons of agriculture during harvest, we employ close to 30% of the workforce here in Kern County, which is a big number.
Right. So can you tell us a little bit about what some of the hardest hit crops are? I mean, obviously different crops have different water needs, as you mentioned, like lettuce. Some of the hardest hit ones.
Statewide, I do believe it's the rice industry that's feeling it, because that is a complete flood irrigated crop, to where we don't grow that here in Kern County, or at least not that I'm aware of. I know that a lot of the rice industry is fallowing or choosing not to grow this year. Here in Kern County, you have to see our top 5 producing crops are almonds, pistachios, grapes, carrots, and dairy, actually. Of those 5, I feel like, from what I hear, the crops that are hit worst are probably the carrots, because those have a different type of irrigating. But for, the almond trees and the permanent crops like grapes, that are always in the ground, I do believe that most of those are all working on the most water efficient irrigation systems possible.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the Farm Bureau itself. How are you helping farmers or agriculture companies that are trying to get through this drought?
We are always looking for ways to help our growers make ends meet. Right now it isn't just the groundwater legislation that we're being hit with. We also are into this new irrigated lands regulatory program, which is another government regulation on agriculture that basically states that we have to start testing all of the groundwater beneath the farmland to keep record of how much of nitrates are sipping into the groundwater basin from the use of fertilizer. So with that, our growers are having to pay, I think statewide the average is $8.50 an acre And when you think about our larger growers here in Kern County, we're paying close to $6.50 an acre, $6.50 an acre for this testing. But it adds up, and this is a year after year cost. And they're actually estimating that it may actually increase per acre. So it's another hit to our growers' budget that we haven't had to deal with in the past. And we also have just been hit with our first minimum wage increase.
Right.
So that's another hit to our growers. And then this groundwater legislation, which only time will tell how much this is going to impact our growers, but they're bracing for it. You know, a lot of our growers are, deciding now what the next 5 years are going to look like for their crops. Should they get rid of their crops now and plant permanent, or should they, take a different strategy in what they'll be growing? So for the Farm Bureau, we're trying to always keep our members updated on the most recent water conversations that are being had, especially here with the county. And just what it means to our growers. We basically just have to prepare them from here on out. And it's tough because agriculture is such a target statewide. And it's hard for Kern County because we are the second highest producing agricultural county in the nation, not just in California. So we become a huge target, and people like to compare the, water usage from LA to San Francisco to Bakersfield. And that's also not fair, I feel like, to Bakersfield's urban side, because we have lawns, we don't have high rises, and it's not fair to compare those, those stats. Same with agriculture. We're mostly agriculture here, and it is, one of the larger job contributors to the county. So, it's tough.
We appreciate all the efforts that you and the folks at the Farm Bureau put forth in advocacy for our agricultural community, and keep up the good work and let us know how we can help. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was Beatris Sanders of the Kern County Farm Bureau. We appreciate her coming in, and we're going to take a break and come back right after this with more Strictly Business. Stay tuned.